Cat, it's all boarded up. I've been through this whole section. This door. No! No. The door just opened by itself. No.
Where? You saw a light?
Hello?
Starting us off at number 10 is Dawson, New Mexico. If any of the ghost towns on this list have a tragic past, it is definitely Dawson. The mining town was bought by the Phelps Dodge Corporation back in 1906, and they're the ones who really built up the town, putting in homes, facilities like hospitals, stores, a cinema, even a golf course. The city had 10 mines, and the place was booming with a population of 9,000 until disaster struck not once, but twice. In 1913, Canyon Mine number 2 was shaken by an explosion in a neighboring town, and out of the 286 men who showed up to work that day, only 23 survived. Then, 10 years later, Canyon number 1 had a mine car that derailed into timbers and the electric trolley cables sparked, igniting the coal dust. A majority of the 123 men that died that day were children of men from the previous disaster. Parts of the city's population moved after each explosion, and the demand for coal also declined quite quickly. By 1950, the last mine in Dawson was closed and the whole area was sold and the structures demolished. The town was just kinda left to rot. What's especially creepy about it though is the 400 white crosses in Dawson Cemetery that symbolize the miners who died. Imagine not knowing it was an abandoned city and just going there and seeing that and be like, huh?
Moving on at number 9, we have Tianducheng. The Tianducheng is known for being a copycat of Paris. Seriously, it was designed to look like as if you are in Paris. The streets look just like the ones in France, and they have a replica of the Medici fountain. To top it all off, they even have their very own Eiffel Tower. But sadly, it wasn't as successful as they hoped, and now many of the buildings remain deserted. Now people think of it as a creepy version of France. Many visitors feel uneasy walking down the streets. The once beautiful city now has stores with cracked and worn paint, and has a bunch of creepy statues with eyes that look like they follow your every move. In fact, some stores are nothing more than walls that they painted to look like stores and storefronts with like windows with merchandise in the windows. Kinda weird, kinda creepy.
At number 8, we have Six Flags Astro World. Am I the only one that thought Six Flags made some deal with Travis Scott and it was gonna be somehow related to him? I was gonna be like, I'm the highest in the room, and then I realized I got it way off. Opened in 1968, Astro World was a seasonal park located in Houston, and it was actually meant to be part of Astrodome initially, but was sold to Six Flags in 1975. The park had 10 themed areas, and its water park sister Water World became part of it in 2002. There was a 610 limited train, Alpine Valley, and Oriental Village. I just hate the word Oriental to describe things in the West. Like, I know for a fact by Oriental Village they mean an East Asian inspired theme, and Oriental just feels like they're trying to other you, and I just don't like it. Anywho, rant over. Anyway, on the 12th of September 2005, it was announced that Astro World would be closing and getting demolished. Despite wanting to sell it for $150 million, they ended up selling it for $77 million, which is a shocking loss.
Coming number 7, we have Bodie, California. Being alive during the gold rush would have been a crazy time. I mean, it's kinda like that now with kids trying to get famous on TikTok. You have all of them rushing out to make videos that no one's gonna watch for people who don't care them, all because they don't have any real skills. The gold rush was like that, except you would have to move your whole family hundreds of miles across the country by buggy, and half of you would die along the way, like in the game Oregon Trail. And then you would get to where you're going and you would hope that you would get rich, but you'll probably just end up finding rocks and loneliness. Well, if you want to find a taste of that, head over to Bodie, California. It's amazing to think that people once thought this would be the best place to set up, since it's extremely close to a desert. But it used to be a bustling town with people craving gold more than I crave street fight videos.
In our 6th spot, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance. But more than 22 buildings are still unfinished. and there's no citizens working inside the big tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as being completely empty, and he says it's 10 times creepier at night. There's a bunch of brightly lit roads, but no one is driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards his car, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? He has no idea, but now he thinks that the area is haunted. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Forlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the town to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. He hoped to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazon for car tires and such. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a leaf fungus and then they died. Then his team and him kept getting into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers. So in 1945, he canceled the plans and sold it to the Brazilian government. All that remains are a couple of structures overgrown by nature.
At number 4 is Virginia City, Montana. So this city was founded in 1863 and was initially called Varina after the only First Lady of the Confederate States, Varina Howell Davis. But the judge objected to that and called it Virginia City instead. It took a matter of weeks for the town to start booming, people coming from all over for the gold rush. But this particular region had no justice system or law enforcement, yet it had a lot of wealth. And what happens when a place has no rules and a lot of money? A lot of shit. Criminal activity was at an all-time high. Road agents were killing and robbing people on the roads everywhere. They killed more than 100 people in a year. At its peak, it had 10,000 people, but of course when the gold ran out, so did the appeal of the city. By the 1940s, Virginia City had become a ghost town and was bought by Charles and Sue Bovee, who started maintaining the ruins, and by the 50s it was good for tourism. Fun fact, the frontier woman Calamity Jane lived there as well. Woohoo! Filling at number 3 slot is Shaniko, Oregon. Now plot twist, unlike nearly every single town on this list, Shaniko wasn't a mining town. It was for ranchers and was once called the wool capital of the world. People started making camps wherever they could find water, and it was actually initially called Cross Hollow and started properly booming at the start of the 20th century. The town was used as a transportation hub and was a center of sheep, wool, wheat, and cattle production. Their sales were like 3 and 4 million annually just for wool, which is incredible. At the start of the 1900s, there were 2 fires in the business district that ruined any extra hype about the city, and that's what jump-started it into decline. The place had been a ghost town since the 50s, but all the buildings are still there. The hotel, Sage Museum, Shaniko School, the ice cream shop Goldie's, and more. Now at number 2 is Kamioka Mine. So this abandoned mine is located in a ghost town of the same name in Japan. Founded in the 19th century, it was the country's leading source of zinc, and it used to be one of the largest mines in East Asia. Scientists found a lot of cadmium ore deposits, so the place was mined till the 80s. After that and the overall closing of industrial ore production, the village and mine both became deserted. The tunnels are honestly super eerie. The whole labyrinth is just there in ruins, which attracts a lot of urban explorers. Now all the mines are located at least 1 kilometer under the surface, and a lot of the rooms are actually flooded. The dripping water and rust is everywhere, making the mine look super sinister. It actually reminds me of this horror movie that I watched called Creep. It's like German and British, and these people discover this underground network of tunnels, and a serial killer lives inside, and then he obviously ends up killing everyone. You know how it is. Now the middle of the 20th century brought about a problem with this mine. Mining camp residents started getting sick with the diseases unknown to any scientists. Turns out the vapor of cadmium salt soaked into the earth of the island, making people sick. That's a messed up
Coming at the number 1 spot, we have the Serbian Ice Mine, a mine that has caught some notoriety for its frosty decor. I can't imagine something I would want to explore less. Something with a rocky floor, ice all over the walls, it's dark all the time, there's bugs and rodents everywhere, and the temperature is below freezing. Yeah, that sounds like a great first date spot. With all that being said, the frozen mine does look spectacular in some ways. The ice formations that have been built up from the slow water drips have left what looks like the jaws of a massive beast at the entrance of this underground warehouse. If you don't have a trained eye, you might think that those are massive stalactites and stalagmites, but it's actually just a whole bunch of ice. At least then you don't have to worry about breaking them when you come to visit. If you venture deeper into this mine, you will see that the ice shows no mercy, as frozen bats have been glued to the ceiling. When you start to see animals that have frozen to death and now their corpses are stuck on the walls like decorations, I think it would be time to turn around.
So starting off this countdown, we have Ordo's Kangbashi, and I apologize, I know I'm going to butcher every single name on this list. Please give me a break, okay? I suck at pronunciations, especially cities that I've never been to. So this is the most famous ghost city in China, and the world's largest ghost town. Located in Inner Mongolia, Ordo's Kangbashi was meant to be a modern city with a new style of architecture. There's tons of unique looking buildings, large stadiums, theaters, and big public spaces. It was actually called the Dubai of China. Just one problem. It lacks people. The city was built for 300,000 people, but only 70,000 ended up moving to live there. Then, after running out of funding, construction on the city just stopped. Nowadays, there are tons of unfinished and empty apartments. Now it's called a modern ghost town, a stillborn city, and a failed utopia. If you travel the area, it is beautiful with its buildings, but the silence and the emptiness is very frightening. Not only that, but beneath the streets is a whole underground parking system, which will give you nightmares. It looks like a giant underground doomsday bunker.
Coming in at number 9 is Ruby, Arizona. This mining town started operating in the year 1877, and it was quite rich in things like silver, gold, copper, lead, and zinc. Apparently the first US post office was in Ruby, which is kind of like a cute Easter egg of information. What's not cute though are the 3 double homicides that took place, aka the Ruby murders. What a plot twist, no one saw that coming. In Feb of 1920, the 2 owners of the Ruby Mercantile were shot and killed during a robbery. According to the locals and eyewitnesses, the perpetrators were Manuel Garcia and Ezekiel Lara, and it was quite easy to identify them since they were the only 2 unknown Mexicans seen in Ruby at the time. Then in August of the next year, the shop's new owners, the Pearsons, were shot, killed, and robbed by the same group, yet their 3 daughters were somehow spared. The largest manhunt in the southwest was still underway for these people, and a year later in July they struck again. 2 men in the gang were identified and arrested, and as they were being transported in a police car, the prisoners managed to get free and kill both of the attending officers. Despite all that, the late 20s were actually the peak of prosperity for Ruby. In the 30s, the mine was the leading zinc and lead producer in the state, but by 1940, the mine was closed down. A year later, the whole city was abandoned, but it's been kept pretty well preserved, I must say. At number 8, we have Bodie, California. Located east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, Bodie struck gold in 1859, literally, but the hype around the town started actually growing after the Standard Company took things over in 1876. Within 3 years, the population had risen to about 7,000 to 10,000 people, and there were like 2,000 buildings in the city. But by the end of the 1870s came with a savage winter which killed hundreds of people through disease and exposure. Explosions and accidents in the mine also added to the death toll. The potential of the city brought in gamblers, miners, and other corrupt businessmen, and because of that, there were around 65 saloons, gambling halls, brothels, opium dens, and more. Some of their breweries were open 24/7, which back then was insane. But for that reason, the town's reputation started going down. Violence was at an all-time high. Someone would get killed or robbed every day, and street fights were a daily occurrence. By 1881, it was described by Reverend F.M. Warrington as a sea of sin lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. Sounds like the Las Vegas of that time. By 1912, the city started declining as mining profits decreased as well. Within a few years, the newspaper, railway, and last mine had all closed down, and by 1915, it was a ghost town, and it was actually named a National Historic Landmark in 1961. Filling on number 7 slot is Mystic, South Dakota, and honestly, I low-key just picked this one because of its name and that it reminded me of Mystic Falls from the Vampire Diaries. So Mystic is one of the many ghost towns located in the Black Hills mountain range, and Native Americans have quite an extended history with the area. It was actually called Sitting Bull before it was called Mystic. The city wasn't even really a city. It started off as a creekside camp in 1876 and somehow survived a really long time. Mystic's post office was built by 1885, 4 years later it had a railway line, and a second one by 1906. The town started importing coal into the hills and exporting gold out of them. And the journey definitely wasn't easy. A bunch of floods happened, destroying a lot of their bridges and railway lines. The Great Depression screwed them royally. Their sawmill burned down, but they just kept bouncing back, and we like that never give up energy. I don't have it, but I like it. By the end of the Second World War, everything was going to shit, and the mill was too expensive to operate, and then people stopped traveling there. The sawmill was closed, and so was everything else, and finally the whole population was just gone. on. Now at number 6 is a Dugin Quarry. Located near the suburbs of Moscow, Dugin Quarry started operating in the 16th century, extracting limestone. And this quarry is massive. It's more than 5,000 meters long, and it's been abandoned for centuries, meaning you can go explore its tunnels for sure, but without a map, your ass is getting lost and dying. The dilapidated quarry has so many old artifacts like the clothes of previous workers, burners where they cooked food. You can even see real sleepers, which is so creepy. Like, how could anyone have slept there? The structure of the mine is also complicated as hell, so you actually shouldn't go in without a professional guide. It looks like it's gonna fall on top of you any second because all the passages are made out of stone. Just stone. Where's the cement? Where's the earthquake proof like bendy?
Coming in at number 5, we have Cody, British Columbia. Now let's jet over to my home province of British Columbia. It's known for being beautiful with lush green forest and mountains so high they look like they were pulled out of Lord of the Rings. And nature has taken back what used to be the town of Cody, British Columbia. The place was booming in the 1800s because 5 separate mines were discovered in the area. This brought in a bunch of jobs and an equal amount of people. It would seem that the money would never stop, but come turn of the century, everything started to dry up when people's values changed and the mine life was no longer as profitable. The town was trying to stay afloat, but a massive fire in the 1940s would seal the deal for this forgotten relic. Now trees and green have enveloped the shell of this former township.
At number 4 is Teche Tolverein. Yeah, that was a mouthful, but then again, any German word usually is. Located in the German city of Essen, this coal mine first became operational in 1834 and is actually under UNESCO protection. Some of its quarries were turned into mining museums after the mine shut down in 1986. The mine is open to the public since it attracts a lot of tourism. It has the artifacts, the history, the culture. It's bloody called Teche Tolverein, for God's sake. I mean, I would go there just to say it over and over again. Teche Tolverein, Teche Tolverein. Remix that. But many industrialists who have visited the mine claim to have heard abnormal knocks down there. Tourists have also heard unexplainable faint sounds of men and their tools at work, making it sound like active work is still going on when it isn't and hasn't for centuries. You know what that sounds like? Teche Tolverein.
In our third spot, we have Sanxi Pod City. Located just outside of New Taipei, this city is filled with pretty weird styled homes. These homes literally look like UFO pods stacked on top of each other. In fact, it has been nicknamed the UFO houses. So construction of the city began in 1978 and it was meant to be like a vacation resort area. But a lot of bad things happened in the area which stopped construction. Several fatal car accidents occurred near the construction sites. And then they lost a lot of investments. So the whole thing just came tumbling down. Now it's said that the area is cursed with bad luck. This is because they bisected a Chinese dragon statue near the front gates. By doing so, it's bad luck, and that's why the project was never finished. In our second spot, we have Kentubik, Uzbekistan, otherwise known as Asbestos Island. This area was where biological weapons were being tested out. One of the labs there worked with smallpox and the bubonic plague. In 1971, 10 people on the island contracted smallpox, and 3 died as a result of the testings. Then in 1988, when they banned biological weapons, they buried tons of anthrax spores in the area. In fact, it was considered the world's largest anthrax dumping grounds. Over the years, there have been attempts to decontaminate the area, but they still believe it's way too hazardous to live there. As a result, it lays abandoned. And in our number 1 spot, we have Ipetuan, Argentina. Ipetuan was once known as a perfect spa destination with its therapeutic thermal waters. In fact, since the lake was so rich in minerals, it was used to treat certain skin conditions, muscle pain, joint inflammation, and diabetes. But sadly, the area was hit hard with a bunch of rainstorms and floods. Following this, a dam broke which was protecting the area, and tons of water poured in. Residents said that they woke up to ankle-deep water in their home. The water level rose a centimeter each hour. 2 weeks later, it was 3 meters deep. By 1993, it was 10 meters deep. The village became uninhabitable and abandoned. It's said that the residents never fully recovered from the trauma of losing everything literally overnight. It's so sad. Now there are attempts to rebuild the area, but chances are nobody is going to move back to an area where the same thing could happen again.
Starting us off at number 10 is Six Flags New Orleans. Now this was the one coming up the most in all my searches, so I thought it was only fitting that we started with this one. Now this 140-acre park originally opened its doors in 2000 as Jazzland, but was leased by Six Flags from 2002 till 2009, and that's when its name was changed. However, tragedy struck in the morning of August 29th, 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. Since the park was located right next to Lake Pontchartrain, the water flooded into the park and the drainage pipes just couldn't keep up. After all was said and done, the park was under 20 feet of water and it took more than a month to drain. How screwed up is that? Due to the major wind and water damage, the park was closed indefinitely, and I don't think you guys realize how bad it actually was. 80% of the buildings were demolished, every single flat ride was destroyed, and the one ride that kind of survived was the Batman the Ride roller coaster. The company didn't want to rebuild the park since it was their least profitable one anyway and tried to leave their 75-year lease, but the mayor was like, nah, you have to rebuild. Either way, the park's donezo. Coming in at number 9 is Auto World. Located in Flint, Michigan, Auto World was an indoor theme park that started its operation back in 1984. The plan was to try and get tourists to come to Flint, and at its grand opening the governor even said it would trigger the rebirth of the great city of Flint. It took 2 decades of planning and it opened with a huge parade and a lot of media attention. It was predicted that it would bring in 1 million guests a year, but by the fall of that year the numbers were already going down. The attractions included a replica of historic downtown Flint, a cabin with mannequin Jacob Smith inside of it, a Ferris wheel, a carousel, a historical carnival ride, and more. By December of that year, it was announced they'd only be open during weekends, and by January they'd closed it down completely. Yes, the park opened for brief periods over the next few years, but by 1994 it was permanently closed. Damn, what a rough go. Didn't even last 1 proper year of being open full time. Yikes.
In our 8th spot, we have Chang'an. On May 20th, 2011, the construction of the city of Chang'an in Yunnan was approved. 100,000 new apartments were built, but they have no occupants. You have enormous office buildings with no workers, big streets with no cars. Now it's considered one of the largest ghost towns in Asia. What's creepy is that sections of the city remain uncompleted. There are dirt roads all trashed with rubble. It literally looks like an apocalyptic area. It's very creepy, especially when it's dead silent and all you can hear is the wind whistling through the abandoned buildings. Coming in at number 7, we have the Guangdong province. The Guangdong province is home to tons of abandoned villages, but the one I want to talk about is the village of Dakito. This village is known to have a ghostly presence, and it's said to be haunted, but there's hardly any information out there on it. So I don't know what exactly happened there or why it's abandoned, but all I know is that something sinister haunts the land. Coming in at number 6, we have Ujiapu. Referred to as China's Manhattan, Ujiapu was created to be a center for world trade and finance, but more than 22 buildings are still unfinished, and there are no citizens working inside the tall buildings. A cab driver described the area as the following: there's just nobody there. It's like having a good-for-nothing child. His words, not mine. He says at night the area is 10 times creepier, with brightly lit roads but no one driving on them. He claims that one time he was driving down the road when he saw headlights coming towards him, as if a car was going to crash into him head on. He braced for impact, but nothing hit him. When he looked back, there was nothing there. So what were the lights that he saw? I have no idea, but he's terrified of the area and thinks it's haunted.
Coming in at number 5 is Six Flags Atlantis. I used to hate water parks as a kid since I couldn't go with my glasses, and because I didn't wear contacts back then I just could not see and it just pissed me off. Anyway, as you could have guessed, Six Flags Atlantis was a water park in Hollywood that opened up back in 1979. Well, initially it was a private venture called Atlantis the Water Kingdom, but they didn't have enough money to finish it, so Six Flags was like, here we are, sell it to us. Now, the water park included a lake with water ski shows, a wave pool, 7-story slide tower, and more. Now, unfortunately, due to another hurricane, Hurricane Andrew, the park was hugely damaged in 1992 1992 and it was closed and auctioned off. Nowadays there's a cool plaza that takes up the space. There's now a Kmart instead of a wave pool, so I mean a downgrade for sure, but I mean times are tough, you guys. And number 4 is Six Flags Power Plant, which sounds like the shittiest theme park ever. Like, how is that name appealing at all? Hey guys, do you want to have fun at the power plant? Like, no, that has no ring to it. Located inside the Inner Harbor district of Baltimore, Six Flags acquired the property in 1985 and tried to turn it into an indoor theme park. This was their chance at making basically Auto World 2.0, and it was actually more successful than its predecessor, but it also closed down very quickly and transformed into a Hard Rock Cafe, then a Gold's Gym, a Barnes & Noble, and so on. Filling at number 3 slot is Warner Bros. Movie World Germany. So this park started off as a family-owned thing back in 1967 and was sold to numerous different people throughout the years. In 1994, Warner Bros. Bought it and started building what was Warner Bros. Movie World Germany and had the grand opening 2 years later. It had a bunch of attractions and rides and was split into 7 different areas. There was the Hollywood Street set, which showed Area 51, the Lost Temple, and Looney Tunes 4D. There was the Streets of New York thing, Nick Clan, Santa Monica Pier, the Old West, and so on. By the end of 1999, they had sold it to Premier Parks, which is again what Six Flags used to be called, but the other attractions that came in the following years made the park very unpopular. Families stopped coming, and soon even adrenaline junkies stopped coming, and that's when you know it's bad, when even they stop coming. Eventually, they sold it to Star Parks, and they opened it as Movie Park Germany, which is what it still currently is. Now at number 2 is Kennecott, Alaska. So this is more of an abandoned mining camp than it was a huge city, but it was still kinda like a little town. Located next to Kennecott Glacier, a duo of prospectors traveled to the area in 1900 and found a bunch of malachite. The area had copper ores as well, and by the next year the Alaska Copper Company took root, and by 1905 things were going really well. There was a steamship line, a railway, a school, a hospital, tennis courts, and a bunch of mines. Between 1911 and 1938, Kennecott produced $200 million worth of iron ore. That is ridiculous. For a remote little town where the nearest bit of civilization is 60 miles away, that is a lot of money. By the end of the 30s, the place was deserted since mining profits had gone down, and honestly it was too far away from everything and it just wasn't the vibe anymore. The population was 3 and those people served as the watchmen of Kennecott. And finally at number 1 is Garnett, Montana. I was so pissed. I try not to repeat any states in this video and have it all be from different states, but alas, Montana is on here twice. Damn you America and your 50 states. The prospectors found the semi-precious red gems there and gold, which is where the city got its name from. The place was founded in the 1890s as a major commercial and residential area for mining and had around 1,000 people living there by 1898. It had 2 barbershops, 13 saloons, a school, 4 hotels, a doctor's office. It wasn't really that bad to live in at all. The city became abandoned after the gold ran out, but they would have left anyway since a huge fire broke out in 1912 and destroyed half the city. That part was never rebuilt again, which is super eerie. Just imagine burnt ruins for half the town and just historical old buildings on the other side. There has to be some symbolism in that, I'm sure of it. Garnett is now on the National Register of Historic Places and you can visit it, just don't move there.
Starting off this countdown, we have Ruby, Arizona. Established in 1910, Ruby used to be a popular mining town. Now it's a popular and well-preserved ghost town. The population of this area started off small, but over the years it gradually increased. At its peak, it had a population of about 1,200 residents. Now, since the population number was so small, they really didn't have a proper law enforcement system. In fact, a lot of families were scared to live there. Between 1920 to 1922, Ruby and the surrounding area was the scene of 3 double homicides, known as the Ruby Murders. In 1920, 2 brothers were found shot in their store. One with a bullet in his head and his back, the other brother had been shot through his left eye. Then in 1921, the store's new owner was attacked, killed, and their store was robbed. Then in 1940, the mine closed down, and the next year the town was pretty much abandoned. Coming in at number 9, we have New Idria, California. New Idria was once another popular mining area. However, over the years, mercury has been seeping into the water and ground, contaminating it. It's considered way too toxic for people to live there. On top of the mercury problem, they also have an asbestos problem. So yeah, EPA declared it not a safe area to be in, let alone live in. In our 8th spot we have Tawerga, Libya. Back in 2011, residents of this town were forced to leave by resistance forces. Buildings were burnt and ransacked, and people's possessions were thrown about, littering the streets. There once was 30,000 people living there. Now it's home to no one, and the residents are never allowed to return home. This is one of the places you literally can't visit. The whole area is defended by a small military. You probably will be killed if you try to visit this area. Also, good luck finding it. Its main road is now erased from road signs, and there's no directional arrows telling you where to go. All that's left of this place are destroyed homes and lone cats and dogs. Moving on at number 7, we have Pyramiden, Norway. Or, as it is now called, the Soviet ghost town in the Arctic Circle. So way up in the Arctic Circle is Pyramiden. Probably said that wrong, I apologize. A once popular mining town. During World War II, this mining town was very successful. However, it fell following the downfall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Then the town was the site of a tragic accident. A plane crashed in the area, killing some of the residents. After that incident, the town could no longer support its residents, and by 1998, it was deserted. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place. Nowadays, thanks to the cold climate, the town is pretty much preserved. The buildings are still in place, and homes look like they are ready to welcome families back. But no one wants to step foot in an area where such a big tragedy occurred.
Now at number 6 is Rhyolite, Nevada. Located right near the eastern part of the Death Valley National Park, this town got its start in 1905 as multiple mining camps just sprung up out of nowhere. It was the gold rush, so people were migrating to Rhyolite left, right, and center. The city had a lot to offer. It had resident hotels, an opera house and symphony, a hospital, a stock exchange, but most appealing of all, its infamous red light district. Girls from San Francisco would get employed by the shops there, which was kind of like a delicacy, if you will. At its peak, the town had about 3,500 to 5,000 people, but it went down as quickly as it went up. The earthquake of 1906 and financial panic of the next year made money scarce, and the mine stock value started crashing. They started closing down, which meant miners were also moving out of the town, and by 1920, the place was a ghost town. Coming in at number 5 is Kalapana, Hawaii. So this town is part of the Puna district of Hawaii, and fun fact, it was home to the infamous Star of the Sea painted church. Hawaii is such a volcanic cesspool. It literally has 15 out of the 129 that are part of the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount chain. In 1990, lava from the vent of Kilauea destroyed most of the town and its houses. Over 100 houses were buried in the lava flow, as well as Kalapana Gardens. The church was moved so as to not perish as well. The flow was so bad that even 2 neighboring towns were destroyed, and a new coastline was formed under the 50 feet of lava flow. By 2010, there was literally only 35 houses left, and now the town is closed because of new destructive lava vents. It just don't stop, do it.
In our 4th spot, we have Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma was once a popular lead and zinc mining town. In fact, it was home to a number of families. But in the mid-90s, a third of the younger population suffered from lead poisoning, and they were experiencing cognitive issues. But they kind of just ignored that and continued living there until 2006. That's when it was discovered that 80% of the buildings were pretty much going to collapse at any time. In fact, one motorist died after driving into a huge hole in the ground. After they discovered that, the population dropped to only 20 people. People fled like crazy. They got the heck out of there.
Coming in at number 3, we have Aloui Mine, Morocco. Sometimes what's left behind will show you how powerful the human spirit can be. The Aloui Mine looks like a sheer test of willpower as it's carved into the side of a mountain. It was controlled by the French for nearly 30 years while Morocco was under French control. After the French left, however, the mine fell into disarray, as it was never the intention of the Moroccan people to create a mine there. What's left is a ghost town that hovers in the air like a fortress propped up by stone.
Now at number 2 is Six Flags Worlds of Adventure. Initially opening at Geauga Lake in 1887, this recreation area was bought by Premier Parks in 1995 and renamed to Six Flags Ohio. Then with the acquisition of SeaWorld Ohio, the 2 parks became Six Flags Worlds of Adventure, and I don't even think I have to go into how problematic and bad SeaWorld is. You guys know, you've seen the documentary Blackfish, I don't have to tell you. Now the park got 20 additional new rides, including Roadrunner, Express, Villain, Batman Night Flight, etc. They wanted to add rides to SeaWorld as well, but by combining the parks, SeaWorld created the biggest theme park in the world at that time. The SeaWorld side stayed the wildlife area, featuring mainly marine shows, well, not really shows, more like exploitation and entrapment and depression and just not treating the animals right, but anywho. They then expanded that side further by adding Hurricane Mountain, which was the largest water slide in North America, which is ridiculous. Sadly, by 2004 they were facing high debt and sold the park to Cedar Fair, who closed down the park in September of 2007, and good riddance to those. And finally, and number 1 is Wild Waves and Enchanted Village. The park has a super long history as well, so it opened up as the Enchanted Village back in 1977 and was hugely popular in the summer in the Washington area. It had around 6 rides and took up 12 acres, but in 1984 the Wild Waves water park was built right next to it. Then in 2000, Six Flags bought it for $19.3 million, and at this point it had expanded to 70 acres with over 20 rides. They thought of splitting the park into 2 separate parks in 2016 to make more money, and it worked, but they had this whole park hopping ticket thing that was super complicated that all the customers just hated, so they were like, okay, let's not do this. In 2007, they sold the park to CNL Income Properties, and it's a good thing they did too, because in 2016, there was a drowning incident in the activity pool. You know what I mean? A 33-year-old man had drowned, which a bunch of kids had reported to the lifeguard, but initially they thought he was just playing a prank on them by lying at the bottom of the pool, but they stopped laughing once they realized that guy truly be dead. Starting us off with number 10 is the Horton Mines. This abandoned mercury mine is in Pershing County, Nevada, and is at the height of 5,400 feet, which is pretty damn high if I do say so myself. Now back in 2013, Frank Hood from the YouTube channel Exploring Abandoned Mines uploaded a video of him exploring this Horton mine. The mine dates back to the mid-1800s, and Frank has explored hundreds of abandoned mines, but he claimed this one was the creepiest one he's ever been to. And I trust Frank, I've been in 0 mines, he's been in more than 100, so he wins. It starts off with him going into the mine and realizing there's water streaming out of it, which apparently is not a good thing when you come to mines. And the mine is old as hell, there are hanging chains coming down from the roof of it, and just other rusty abandoned mesh equipment. Frank actually refused to fully go into the mine because he was that scared, and he said he felt the sensation that something was watching him. The air just felt sinister, and he didn't seem welcomed into the mine. The camera then pans to the entrance of the cave, and then when it pans back to the tunnel, that's when you see one of the chains swinging back and forth quite a bit. And none of the chains had moved beforehand, so you can tell there's not much wind going in and out of this mine. But this chain was deliberately moving, after which another chain started moving as well, and at that point, Frank was like, peace out, I'm not gonna die by some evil miner ghost today. Me neither. Good on you, Frank.
Coming at number 9, we have Hashima Island, Japan. Coal used to be the biggest thing on the planet. Everyone wanted coal. You could use it in your home, you could use it to make electricity, you could use it to make diamonds. It was the hottest thing on the market. Everyone was working in coal mines. You had grown men going down there to try and make a living for their family, and you had kids going down there to make sure they can make good money and never grow up to be men. There was even birds down there to warn you if toxic gas was coming through and ready to end your life. Well, this fuel was so popular that Japan built a whole city on an island around a coal mine. In the 70s, this place was a hot spot, and families were being moved over there in the boatloads to make this place the new coolest coal mine in the world, and it just might have been for a time. That's until everyone started to switch over to gas. Then the mine's profits started to plummet, and slowly but surely the whole area became a ghost town. Now there's almost nothing there, just the shells of buildings that give off the vibe of a nuclear wasteland. Not really the best place to take your next vacation unless you and your hubby have a thing for desolate landscapes. Alright.
At number 8, we have Wildeck Mine. So back in 2016, Frank Hood, our MVP of abandoned mines, went to this 150-year-old Wildeck gold mine in Australia. In the video, he walks through the tunnels as per normal, but the deeper he gets, the spookier everything becomes. Ooh. Ooh. I hope you're listening to this at night with like some popcorn and like that really added to the soundtrack. Now at one point you can hear what sounds like many people whispering, and you can literally hear it in the video. Now at first Frank thinks it's wind, but you know how wind has this wind sound like whoosh, whoosh. The sound in the video was of ghostly whispers. Wind does not sound like that. Now as soon as he stops walking, the whispers stop as well, and when he continues, the whispers are back louder than ever. Some viewers commented saying they thought it was the sound of demons or some sort of demonic ritual. Another sub said the sound was of the spirits of the miners who had died there. What's creepy to me is that he went to explore this cave on a stormy night. Like, do you not know what happens on stormy nights, Frank? People get killed. That's what happens. Filling at number 7 slot is Six Flags Dubai. Again, another knife to the heart with this one. First Dubai Land and now this. Now the planned theme park was in the works for years and was initially meant to open way back in November of 2011. Then due to a failed payment, the contract was terminated but then revived and scheduled to open in 2019. And it was going to be colossal, taking up 5 million square feet. It had 27 rides with rides themed after other Six Flags locations like Magic Mountain from the California location, etc. The construction of the park stopped in 2018 since Dubai already has 3 other huge parks, Legoland Dubai, Motion Gate Dubai, and Bollywood Park, and none of those were pulling in the numbers they wanted, so the shareholders were like, maybe this isn't in our best interests, and just ditched the project. Now at number 6 is Wyandotte Lake. This park had humble beginnings, it kind of like started from the bottom, now we it. Operating as a picnic and recreational park way back in 1896. In the 40s it was changed into winter storage for carnival rides, but slowly but surely they started adding rides like the Jet Flyer. In 1995 Premier Parks bought the property and they decided to keep the park's name and continue operating. Fun fact, basically Premier Parks was what Six Flags was called before obviously they changed the name and acquired the Six Flags company. By 2006, Six Flags revealed they had been losing money from the park every year since 1999, and that they were going to sell it to Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. The latter invested something like $45 million to redevelop the whole place, whereas Six Flags was like, I'm not doing that. Nope.
We're now on our 5th and halfway mark with Dandong New District. The new district of Dandong features a giant shopping mall, huge government offices, a basketball stadium, and 60+ apartment towers. There's even a huge Ferris wheel. It seems like a really impressive city, until you actually go there and find that it's all just for show. The Ferris wheel doesn't even work, and no one lives there. So this city is actually part of a border zone between North Korea. The Globe and Mail states, and I quote, "Part of the lure of the Dandong New District was supposed to be its proximity to Sinuiju, the North Korean city on the opposite bank of the narrow Yalu River. But since it's so close, citizens were worried that they would be exposed to possible radiation from North Korea's nuclear tests. So now, no one really wants to live there." Making our way down the list of number 4, we have Nanhui New City. Nanhui New City, formerly named Lingang New City, is located 60 kilometers southeast of downtown Shanghai. The city was said to become a mini Hong Kong, but as we know, that didn't happen. The construction of the city began in 2003 and was said to be done by 2020, but it's nowhere near completion, and some believe that it will never be completed. In fact, 8 university campuses were built and it could house more than 800,000 people, but now it remains abandoned. In fact, it's said that in order to build the city, one homeless man's shelter was destroyed in the process, and with nowhere to go, he committed suicide. People believe that he now will haunt the area and whoever decides to live there. In our 3rd spot, we have Cafe Dien. Construction of the city began in the early 2000s. It was planned to be the solution to Beijing's pollution problem. It was going to be an eco-city, but the project was abandoned due to lack of government support and funding issues. It was built to hold millions of people, but only a few thousand live there. You got locked up abandoned hotels and unfinished buildings. One woman said, and I quote, "I was very sad when I saw how underdeveloped it was. I went back crying all the way." But due to the city's high amount of abandoned buildings, it attracts a lot of urban explorers. But sadly, a group of explorers died after a structural collapse in one of the buildings they were exploring. In our 2nd spot, we have Lanzhou New Area. Built in a sandy plateau area, some parts of the city literally look like you're in a desert. So when you first enter the city, you'll see a huge sign that says, "Welcome to the Oasis City," but it looks nothing like an oasis. The welcome sign looks like it leads to nothing, It looks very barren. But in some areas of the city, you will notice that there are replicas of the Parthenon and the Great Sphinx of Giza. And that's pretty cool, but they're still under construction. So in order to create this city, hundreds of sandy hills were bulldozed down, and some mountains were even cut down. There are some buildings, but it mainly looks like a huge sandstorm just took place and then engulfed most of the buildings. Now, some people do live there, but it's still considered a ghost city as it houses far less than anticipated. Legend goes that the ancient Egyptian god Khafre is cursing this area for having a replica of his Sphinx. Most researchers believe that the Sphinx was meant to act as a guardian for the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid is located beside it. So now, Khafre is mad and has made sure that the construction will never be completed and that it will never be a successful city. And in our number 1 spot, we have Miexi Lake City. I know for sure I pronounced that name wrong. The construction of the city began in 2007 and it was meant to be a highly sustainable city. The whole thing was designed to be eco-friendly and low carbon dependent. The project was described as this, and I quote, "Water is the primary element of design and acts as the heart and center of the master plan." They were going to have a huge lake that was going to be the main source of transportation. So people were going to be boating around, which was said to reduce pollution. And not only that, there were going to be canals that connected you to around the city. They expected a population of 206,000 people living there, but it was never really completed and is now an abandoned project. I mean, it was a pretty cool idea, but I don't know how many people are going to just love boating around instead of driving. Now, the city looks pretty beautiful and not creepy at all. Then again, rumor has it that the lake it was built near has been the site of multiple drownings. But of course, the government thought that was going to be bad news for their city, so they did whatever they could to try and hide the past.